Iran's MP is saying that Syrians' resistance thwarted colonial plots. Some people called it a fight against Zionism, but there's probably many factions that were involved. But if they were attacked, Syria said that they would immediately attack Syria, which leads you to believe who they think is actually going to benefit from this the most. A Syrian Iranian lawmaker says the resistance exhibited by Syrians has frustrated plots hatched by colonial powers. Resistance and unity of the Syrian nation and government has basically led to the failure of colonial plots against the country. The main objective of the U.S. and its allies, which would be Israel, is to weaken Syria as the front line of resistance and struggle against the Zionist regime of Israel. He also censored the atrocities being perpetrated by Takfiri extremists in Syria under the name of Islam, noting that Islam disavows such heinous acts. And he would be referring to stuff like this, actions like this. Terrorists murder 15 Syrians in Homs. They committed a massacre in this village of Shalu on the countryside of Homs province, claiming the lives of 15 citizens and injuring others, including women and children. They were attacking locals with machine guns and rocket shells. He says miscalculation, lack of realism concerning the Syrian issue, and inaccurate analysis led certain regional countries to follow in U.S. footsteps and strengthen these Takfiri extremists. He's referring to probably Jordan, Turkey, to a certain extent Iraq and Lebanon. And I mean that loosely, because they still have elements that are not really for that country, for their country, inside those governments. Russia warns of huge threat if Syria talks fail. He said, open objections have surfaced against holding the Russia-U.S. meeting dubbed Geneva II, not only among Syrians but also among capitals both in neighboring and non-neighboring countries. We must not allow this initiative to fizzle out, arguing that regime change with Assad going through the military means, or using military, would create extremists, an extremist state, and pose a huge threat to those living in Syria and the area. And I don't really know what's going to become of the talks. I'm not too optimistic on it. That's mostly because the opposition, mostly the extremist elements, will not back down until Assad steps down. Syria Vice Prime Minister has been fired over a secret meeting with U.S. envoy. He sought to represent rebels in the Geneva II talks. He was relieved of his duty today, according to the Syrian state media, as after missing a week of work to take an unauthorized trip to Switzerland to talk with U.S. Ambassador Robert Ford. Ford rejected the proposal, saying it made no sense for him to represent both sides. He's not sure how he'd be acceptable as a representative for the rebels, since they don't have anyone going to the conference for them, the rebel sides. I guess this vice whatever says he may have been betting on the U.S. preferring him to nothing. Kind of makes you wonder what he knows as far as regime change with Assad. Is that really going to happen or what? Anyways, this is Global Government News for Wednesday, October 30th, 2013. I'm Darko, and this is my website, ggnonline.net. On YouTube, ddarko2012, and my backup is ddarko2013. I'm going to continue here with some Syria news. I haven't really covered it recently, but I'll end up with some stuff about power shifts or New World Order news. Damascus and Syria and the rebels coordinate to let 1,800 civilians flee a siege town. Remember the towns that have been sieged, basically starving and dehydrated in that. A rare moment of coordination between the Syrian government and the rebels enabled 1,800 civilians to flee a besieged town on the edge of Damascus on Tuesday. They say there's still others that are trapped with little food, water, or medicine. About 1,000. One resident said, I was living in terror, and now I am free and safe with the army, thank God. There's no food and water, we get out with a new spirit now. Lastly, the government says that the residents are being held hostage by the terrorists. If we cared about Sunni-Shia differences, we would never have gotten married, says Syrian refugees. So it says if you still wish to think that the wars raging in Syria is of religious character, you only have to speak to people to revise your opinion, because practically every family story defies the theory. But it goes on here, and it says that neither are aware of such a well-known fact that in Syria, Bashar al-Assad's wife is actually Sunni, while he's a Shia Alawite, because it undermines the basic idea of Syrian conflict, according which Sunnis are allegedly fighting against Alawites and Shias. Said after 2.5 years of attempts aimed at splitting Syria into groups separated by religious background, they have fallen by the wayside, largely because of such inter-religious marriages. So that's pretty interesting. President Obama's Twitter and Facebook accounts targeted in the Syrian Electronic Army attack. I'm only bringing this up because someone made a good point about something about the grid being attacked, a cyber attack. Then I saw this, National Geographic, it's going to be propaganda basically. Coming up November 13th, the American blackout imagines the story of a national power failure in the United States. Blackouts aren't the only crisis that could affect, right? Survive the blackout. What would happen if the lights went out for 10 days? So it'd be caused by a cyber attack. Well, who would it be? Possibly this Syrian Electronic Army. I don't think it's actually Syria that's doing these things. It's probably Zionist Israel or elements within the intelligence community saying that there's a Syrian Electronic Army and basically hacking into all these things and now the president's Twitter accounts. But they really don't want peace, whatever with the conference and that. I don't think they really want peace. They want constant crisis like Libya or Iraq. Iraq's Maliki seeks U.S. arms, offers to mediate on Syria and Iran. Says Maliki may be facing an ever-worsening security situation both internally and regionally, but seems to be styling himself as a major regional player as he visits Washington. He wants heavy weapons, including helicopters, to basically fight against the Islamist factions along the Syrian border. He may find that he's not nearly as popular with the U.S. officials as he was during America's occupation of Iraq, as a number of senators have issued a statement condemning his mismanagement, in quotes, of the nation and accusing him of being under control of Iran. Speaking of Iran, I was talking about how things were kind of scaling back. They were relieving some of the sanctions to get some Iranian money back to them, basically so the Western Zionist powers could keep their scams going, trying to shore up assets any way that they could, liquidize and stuff, hard assets. They were selling helicopters and jets to the Gulf monarchies. There was Apache helicopters, I think, showing up in China, selling Chase Bank to China. And so now all of a sudden they got it. They got everything going, at least until February. And they've already started to change their stance, their rhetoric. They're all peaceful and everything. Oh yeah, good. Iran. Okay, yeah, they're dealing with us in talks. Now it's all of a sudden let's drop an atomic bomb on Iran by the Jewish billionaire and the U.S. lawmakers. The 29th U.S. lawmakers. Actually, it's a different one, but Cheney saying that we need to attack Iran like we did in Iraq over weapons of mass destruction. You also have lawmakers, neocons, typical like Lindsey Graham, trying to push legislation to have any reason to attack Iran. So it does show a need to remove all Zionists from positions of power, if that's who it is that keeps this going, keeps pushing this, going back to the drawing board. They're trying to undo what's been done, right? They're clinging on here. At least that's my sense here, U.S. lawmakers criticize Egypt aid cuts and are considering changing the law. Some lawmakers on Tuesday said they're unhappy about the cuts to Washington's aid to Egypt, announced earlier this month. A U.S. envoy warns of Somalization of Syria. So you can just call it the Libization or the Iraqization or the Afghanization. That's basically what it is. And Somalia is a failed state, which is what they want. And they do want it with Syria. It's funny the way he put this. What history teaches us is that after a crisis like this, there is no going back. Well, exactly, because once you do this, then you create refugees. Those refugees have to go to other countries. Will they be sent back to Syria? No, they won't be. They'll be incorporated into society and somewhere in Europe and North America with different cultures. And they'll call that multicultural, but really what it's going to do is going to kill the existing culture there. And that's what it's all about. More than 400,000 Syrian refugees find little work, crowded schools in Jordan cities. So, and this is going to be a piece about deport refugees. So let them come into the U.S. U.S. is actually number one right now for allowing refugees and asylum seekers this year. We've created humanitarian corridors to have most of these refugees coming out of Syria, but also in Africa, to be poured into Europe and North America. Basically, they said that they want them to be in different types of cultures. I mean, this is actually their policy. I remember reading that just recently. They don't want to put them in Saudi Arabia or like, Jordan's, one situation, but no, not with Turkey. Turkey's actually sending them to Bulgaria, and then from Bulgaria they'll go into Europe. So they have all these little pathways that they're sending these Syrians. A lot of them are actually going to Norway and Sweden, and they're actually, the police aren't even, or in Germany, they're not able to keep up with these people anymore because of all the crime that they're committing there. So this, the main part of this is really refugees, and of course the byproduct is running pipelines, natural gas pipelines and stuff, making money. But also population control numbers too. Polio outbreak in Syria threatens the whole region. So wherever they want to go, like in Africa, cholera outbreak kills 75 people in Nigeria. So disease will follow. Or remember the terrorists. Wherever you want to go, the terrorists, Al-Qaeda, will pop up. Islamic extremist attack on Nigerian provincial capital in state of emergency leaves 128 dead, October 29th. Bomb blast hits resort near Tunisian capital. Tunisia and Egypt are next after Libya and Syria. West spreading terror all over the world, says one commenter. Notice these militants always use the same tactics. The Stern gang did in Israel when they bombed the King David Hotel, dressed as Arabs. Tunisia launches a huge operation to hunt militants. Their army launched a huge operation to track down militants in central region on Tuesday. Yemen's pretty hot too. Remember that Navy SEAL raid in Somalia along with Libya? They actually drone bombed and they killed 6 civilians, but they're claiming that they killed one of the Al-Shabaab heads. These Al-Qaeda mercenaries that call themselves Muslims that infiltrate a place where the globalists want to go to and exploit and create refugees, they need cash. Remember the bunch of cash in Iraq that was found? Gunmen seize truck carrying more than $50 million in cash in Libya. Libya, again, that is a huge place in northern Libya where they're going into Europe through Italy. Which is why they're making a big deal about the boats sinking and stuff like that, because they want to make it easier for all these refugees to be able to come into Europe from Africa. I mean, this is not by mistake here. I mean, you have to feel sorry for these people because the people that are responsible for bombing them and displacing them are then taking them in. And of course, the people they don't say that they want to bomb them, and they're not saying they want to take them in. But they call that democracy, democratization, bomb democracy, as Putin put it. Do we need an African NATO? So maybe, right? We need a common military force that can be deployed against rebellions. Say, I've covered before, about how they're really building that up. They're pouring the West is pouring lots of resources into Africa to expand bases, especially drone bases. But you have to remember, they already have Africa. 2 people die in Russia's Dagestan. So a lot of stuff. 15 people, twin blasts, remotely activated. Blast kills 2 at Russian explosive plant. So ever since the Russians brokered this deal with Syria, as far as chemical weapons, they've been having a lot of these Wahhabi Salafist terrorists being funded by the West, coming out of Libya, being armed there with cash, and going over to Russia's doorstep and just wreaking havoc. Speaking of Putin, Forbes ranks Putin world's most powerful person and downs Obama, who is rated second. Well, who backed Obama besides Goldman Sachs and them, and the banks? Well, energy companies, natural gas, right? Like Putin, Gazprom named the most valuable Russian brands. Who backs Putin, right? U.S. promises to end funding for overseas coal projects. Coal industry workers and allies rally against EPA power plant rules that say they will crush them from October 29th. U.S. is poised to overtake Russia as largest oil and gas producer, including Saudi Arabia, which is why there's suddenly a Saudi Arabian, shifting away with relations. And these energy companies have a lot of power, man. A lot of sway. I mean, they can be poisoning people with all the fracking, and they get what they want. People who live downwind of Alberta's oil and tar sands operations are getting blood cancer. Ecuador's leader is saying that the current world order is simply unfair and immoral. He said it's all about scrambling for power. This is a political rather than economic crisis. Well, that's why they call it economic warfare. They use that to gain power, political power. Like China urging de-Americanized New World Order, talking about new reserve currency. Not saying whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying that it's going to be the same old, whatever order it is. People are not going to have real democracy, and money is going to be used as a means of control. This is GGN. Thank you.